little by little, I started to experiment. I started to let go of the idea that I had to leave parts of myself behind to succeed. I began to integrate, and I started to bring a little bit, just little, because man, it was scary. I started to bring little pieces of mindfulness into my work, not just as a practice I did quietly at home, but as a way of being in the world. Welcome to the Fully Mindful podcast. I'm your host, Melissa. I designed this podcast for you. I'm so happy you're here. We are talking about what it means to live with more intention, creativity, and authenticity so we can make aligned connections. I'm a neurodivergent lawyer turned coach who found the healing power of breathwork and the powerful impact of mindfulness as we navigate this wild and beautiful ride of life. Here at The Fully Mindful, we dive deep with inspiring guests, share solo mini-sodes that are packed with tools you can apply immediately, and I mix it up a bit with tangents and sidebars where my friend and host of the New World Normal podcast, Debbie Harrell, joins us for some down-to-earth, sometimes random, but always meaningful conversations. If you're ready to breathe, reflect, and grow, you're in the right place. Let's get fully mindful. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Fully Mindful. It's Melissa here. Glad to be here. And just me here with you today. No guests, no interviews, just a conversation about something I feel deeply passionate about, the journey to integrating our whole selves. I wanted to take this time to share a little bit of my story, not just the highlights or the lessons learned, but also some of the messiness, the struggle, and the moments when I thought I might not make it through, at least not completely, because I think that's where the real power of transformation begins. It's in those moments when everything feels hard or impossible, and we start to wonder if there's another way. And for as long as I remember, I felt different. I didn't have a name for it growing up, but I was pretty sure I didn't get the playbook that everybody else got. I now know that it was ADHD. They didn't call it back then. It was a long time ago. And my mind was always racing. Sometimes it was racing with ideas or energy. Other times it was some form of anxiety or self-doubt. I struggled to focus, to keep up with expectations. And I definitely struggled to feel like I belonged. But instead of showing the world those struggles, I worked really, really hard to hide them. I learned really early that people didn't want to know about those things. Teachers didn't want to know about it. Family members didn't want to know about it. I was really too much for them or not enough, either one of those two things. So I developed this ability to adapt, to put on a mask of competence and confidence, even when I felt like I was drowning inside. And it worked, sort of. On the outside, I seemed more or less fine, I guess. But on the inside, I carried this constant sense of not enoughness, or like I said, too muchness. But by the time I hit adulthood, and definitely by the time I hit teenagehood, I had found a couple different tools that had helped, at least temporarily. First tool that I had found was food, and using food as a tool to manage my feelings and my nervous system. And then I also found alcohol to manage my way of quieting the noise. And it did. And the anxiety, it silenced the self-doubt. It made me feel, at least temporarily, like I belonged, that I could keep up. I had some sort of purpose. But we all know how the story goes. What starts as a coping mechanism becomes a crutch, I suppose, or at least something that no longer works. And before I knew it, alcohol wasn't just something I turned to when things got hard. Some people do, having a a drink at the end of a difficult day, but it was just a constant, just something that I did. It became a thing I relied on to just be a human among humans. And eventually I reached a point where I couldn't really keep living that way. I kind of felt a little bit crazy. And getting sober in some ways was one of the most difficult things I had to do in my life, but it was also one of the most profound things. I remember feeling this incredible sense of relief. Like the jig was up and it was the last house on the block for me to go to, but also this weight was lifted off my shoulders. I didn't have to wear that mask anymore. And I didn't have to wake up wondering what I had done the night before, or make up excuses or lies. And I wasn't hiding behind alcohol anymore. But here's the thing that no one tells you about getting sober. Once you take away the numbing, once you take away your solution, you're left with everything you were trying to numb. For me, that meant facing all of the feelings of inadequacy, the pressure of being different, and the burdens I had been carrying around for years and really just, had been pushing down. And because I didn't know how to deal with those feelings, I replaced one addiction with another, drive and ambition. And so even though when I got sober, I was really fortunate, I used a 12-step program that really relied on mindfulness and meditation. And I was super fortunate and was living in the Bay Area and was able to connect with Spirit Rock Meditation Center and connected with mindfulness meditation right away. But somehow I was able to compartmentalize that, right? So there was my sobriety and my sober life, and then there was everything else. So I would go to Spirit Rock Meditation Center and I would do retreats and I would do all that stuff and I would keep that separate. So I had the spiritual side of myself, the sober side of myself, and then I had this drive and ambition side. So the drive and ambitious side decided to go to law school, and that I was going to make something of myself, that I was going to show everybody that this little ADHD girl, this one who couldn't do anything, could really do something. So I threw myself into that. Hey everyone, I'm excited to announce my 8-week Positive Intelligence program, the PQ program, starting February 25th to reduce stress, break through barriers, and tap into your true potential. With just 1 to 2 hours a week, you'll quiet inner saboteurs, strengthen your inner sage self, and build lasting mental fitness through live meetings, daily exercises in the PQ app, and powerful practices. Ready to transform? Set up a call with me today in the Calendly link in the show notes. We'll see you there. And I don't know that I was conscious of this, but I think a part of myself was telling myself that if I could just achieve enough, if I could just work harder, I could prove myself, that I'd finally feel worthy. And for a while, that strategy really seemed to work. Going to law school, people would just kudos and how can you do that? And that's so hard. And then graduating law school and taking the bar and passing the bar and getting a job and being a successful, my first job was a prosecutor and trying cases and being a litigator, and people just being really impressed by that, right? And then I was impressed by that, look at me, right? But underneath the surface, maybe not so much the surface, I was still compartmentalizing. So even though I'd wake up every morning and I would do some prayer and meditation, I'd leave that at the front door. I'd walk out the front door and go to my job, and I'd put on my suit and go to my job and be the lawyer that I thought I was supposed to be. So, and I still believed I had to keep my ADHD, my struggles, my recovering self completely separate from my professional self. And I thought that to succeed as a lawyer, I had to leave those parts of myself, of me, completely behind, right? Completely hidden. And that compartmentalization eventually came at a huge cost. It was absolutely exhausting. I remember at one point I was working at the DA's office and I think I lost 15, 20 pounds, which I just didn't have to lose at the time. And just being sick. And I felt really fragmented, like I was living these multiple lives that just didn't connect. And it started to affect everything, my sense of self, my relationships, and it even was, I think, affecting my career. I told myself that I was protecting my professional life by keeping my personal struggles hidden. But in reality, I wasn't showing up fully anywhere. Here I was being this tough prosecutor, whatever the hell that was supposed to mean. But I was losing touch with who I really was. My marriage was even beginning to suffer. My relationships in general were strained. And I started to wonder, was this the life that I wanted to live? The answer was no. But I was honestly perplexed. I didn't know how to fix it. All those years of sobriety, all those years of prayer and meditation, therapy. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to bring all those pieces of myself together. And that's when I really started to do even more deeper work. And at first it felt impossible, like being at the bottom of some impossibly tall mountain and trying to imagine myself getting to the top without any tools. How could I bring my recovering ADHD, messy, but also mindful self into the world of deadlines and litigation and difficult defense attorneys and victims? And God, how could I do it? How could I show up as my whole self in spaces that seem to demand perfection and edginess, right? I didn't know how to do it. But little by little, I started to experiment. I started to let go of the idea that I had to leave parts of myself behind to succeed. I began to integrate, and I started to bring a little bit, just little, because man, it was scary. I started to bring little pieces of mindfulness into my work, not just as a practice I did quietly at home, but as a way of being in the world. And I let the recovering part of me inform my relationships everywhere, not just my relationships with my husband and my friends and family, but relationships with people at work, colleagues, other attorneys, victims. And that allowed to give me a little bit more empathy and understanding. And I stopped seeing, well, it took a while, but I began to stop seeing my ADHD solely as a liability, and started to recognize that there might be some creativity and energy. And that's another story for another day, but that's been a long road. It was much easier for me to see how my recovery from alcohol use disorder could be a gift. And it was much harder for me to bring my ADHD into the world, and still working on that. Definitely, I've come a long way, but I'm still working on it. The result of bringing this mindfulness into all aspects of my life, I became a better lawyer. I became a more present wife. And later, when I had a child, I was able to be a better mother. I became more connected to myself and to the people around me. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged here. Not just in one role or one space or with certain people at certain times, but as a whole person, fully integrated. And what I've learned through this journey is that integration is the key to belonging. And I don't just mean belonging in the external sense, belonging at work, in your family, in your community. I mean belonging to yourself. When we try to hide ourselves, to compartmentalize, we cut off pieces of ourselves, right? And we cut off pieces of our humanity. But when we bring all of ourselves to the table, when we stop hiding, stop pretending, and start embracing every part of who we are, that's when we find true belonging. that's when we start to really feel whole. For me, mindfulness has been the foundation of this integration. It's what allows me to pause, to breathe, and to hold space for all parts of myself, to have compassion for all parts of myself. The strong, the struggling, the messy, and the resilient. It's what helps me stay present even when life feels overwhelming. Let's face it, it often does. And it's what I hope to share with you through this podcast and through the practices I offer, because I believe that integration and belonging aren't just possible, it's our birthright. We are meant to show up fully as our whole selves in every aspect of our lives, so we can be of better service to ourselves and to our fellows. But if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I really honestly don't know where to start, that's okay. I didn't either. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to take one small step. Maybe it's sitting in stillness for a few minutes, just taking a couple of breaths. Maybe it's sharing something vulnerable, someone you trust, or maybe it's simply noticing the parts of yourself you've been hiding and asking, what would it be like to let them be seen by maybe just one person? So thank you for spending this time with me today. Sharing a little bit of my story has reminded me of just how powerful this work can be, not just for me, but for all of us. I hope it inspires you to begin or continue your journey of integration, mindfulness, and belonging. Until next time, take care, be kind to yourselves, and remember, you are whole just as you are right here, right now. Thank you for joining me on the Fully Mindful podcast. If you got value from this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with someone who'd love this content too. Remember, small moments of mindfulness can lead to big changes in your day-to-day life. Until next time, take a deep breath, stay present, and tap into your own mindfulness. I'll see you next week.